Northern Tasmania, good morning. It is 17 to 8. And if you have a child at a public school, you'll know by now that state school teachers will walk off the job this Friday at 1:30. The Australian Education Union says the walk-off for workload work action is a last resort as educators continue to battle for better pay and conditions. The action comes as new data from the Australian Curriculum Assessment and Reporting Authority shows more than half the state schools, Tasmania's schools, are behind the national average for student-teacher ratios. David Genford, President of the AEU, the Tasmanian branch, joins me now. Hello.
Hi, Kim. How are you?
Yeah, good. Look, why are our teacher-student ratios so poor?
It's a good question. I think it can be linked directly to funding. We know that, as you stated, we're behind the national average in Tasmania, and the way that our schools are funded is based on a per ratio figure, which I think it's 15.4. You have to take into account that doesn't include when you look at the specialist teachers and senior staffing. And it's positive when we hear the federal minister talking about a push to increase funding into our public schools, but we know that has to be done in correlation with the state government. So that's what we need to see. We need to see that increase in funding to allow for schools to have that smaller ratio, which can mean that they actually are on an equal footing with some of their mainland counterparts.
Now, I'm guessing this data supports the union's repeated calls for more in-class support.
Yeah, especially because the impasse we seem to be on is the future in-class support. So when we're talking about the third year and beyond, and if we see the increased funding that the federal government is talking about committing to, then I think we'll easily have the money to fund this. But at the moment, the government is very hesitant to commit to long-term funding in regards to making sure we have that support in the classroom. And then I think you're able to help classes and schools and have that flexibility of what that support might look like, and a real impact on teachers, but more important, the learning of the students.
Let's look at some of the figures. Of the worst of the schools, Youngtown Primary had 339 students enrolled and 18.4 full-time equivalent teachers. Sacred Heart had 402 students enrolled and 21.8 full-time equivalent teachers. David, what should the teacher-student ratio be?
Well, I dislike it sometimes when I think it's usually the mercury and the way the national push is that they sometimes target individual schools. We need to understand that the schools need to have some flexibility, and whether or not that means they might have some extra senior teachers around, so that means that their class sizes might be a little bit bigger to allow for an extra senior teacher to help with behaviour management. Maybe that's a choice they may have made. But we know on average that the funding's at 15.4. That needs to be less. That probably means your class sizes are close to 25, and that's probably more of a real term that people can understand instead of the ratio. And we know the research shows if you can get that a better attention to students, they're going to have better outcomes. So I think if we can work towards trying to reduce that ratio, then that's really going to help, and we know it can be done because it's already been done on the mainland. So
what issues does that cause, that teacher to student ratio, from both a teacher's perspective and a student's?
I think it becomes more difficult, especially when you start having behavioural issues in the class, because you know that that's your focus, which as a teacher you want to have on learning, becomes on dealing with behavioural issues. And I've seen what happens, especially when you get bigger classes in low socioeconomic areas, is that becomes a major issue. If you were able to be able to teach and learn and make sure the kids were getting what they wanted, then the outcomes obviously are greater. So I think that people have had everyone in life has experience of what happens when you've got a big group of people in the room compared to when you've got a small group, and the actual attention that each individual can get in all different walks of life. But in that professional learning sense, it's common sense really, but I think it's just crucial in our schools that we get that funding increase that we know is well below what's needed for students. And even if it is a long-term plan to get there, let's commit to a long-term plan and let's do it.
Now, the state opposition, if I can ask you this, came out yesterday taking a stand with parents at Gagebrook Primary School in the south of the state. They claim since the start of the school year, 2 prep teachers at the school have quit. There's been a revolving door of relief teachers. Some parents say they're now considering sending their kids to school part-time as a result. Is this something the union is aware of, David?
Yeah, I've heard it's not just that school. There are a couple of other schools I know of that are really struggling to fill the staff that they need. There's even some of our remote schools are struggling to get a principal in place. Now, this is where we are in a crisis as an education system. We have a teacher shortage. We have let the department and the government know about this for a long time, and we haven't had a legitimate plan to cover the vacancies we knew were coming. So this is why I get frustrated when the government says to me, we've got a lovely offer on the table for you. Why don't you just take it to your members and that'll be great. Because the stuff they've got on the table now, excuse me, is crucial to what we already need to fix the system, and what we want to see happen before we can take this offer to members is a commitment to in-class support that is back-ended to show a funding over the 3 years. That is what we're missing. That's the frustration. And as you said, schools can be highlighted now having issues in regards to finding the staff, and also our teacher assistants. I'm hearing reports of students with a disability not having the support they need because they can't find the teacher assistants either. What is the plan to fix this teacher shortage? And it needs to be implemented soon.
Well, it's Monday. We know industrial action is planned for Friday. Is there any chance between now and then it could be avoided?
There's always a chance. I'd love for the Premier or the Minister to step in and acknowledge that in the third year of the agreement they can find some extra money. This is not a request for money now. This is not a request for extra pay. This is about long-term funding of having people in the classroom to help both the students and the teacher. If the government is willing to come at that and find a way to commit that extra money, then we can call the action off. But at the moment, we feel as though we're being asked to give up something that is already crucial to fix our current system, and I just don't think that's going to work.
Well, big week for the union. Thanks for taking time to speak with me this morning.
No worries. Thanks, Kim.
That's David Genford. He is the Tasmanian President of the Australian Education Union. And on Mornings with Leon Compton, he'll be chatting with the Education Minister, Roger Yensch.